Wow, I can't believe America has been around for 2006 years. This bit already sucks. Gaming in the current year is normally my annual wrap-up to go over all the games I played within a calendar year. That may sound like a lot, but there are some exceptions, especially after last year where I played so much crap that I spent the last quarter making a giga-huge video. I mentioned in said video that I might split up gaming in the current year if it borders on being that large again. And while that's not exactly the reason you see this video before you now, it's part of it. See, because there is a rotten apple where my brain should be, I spent a lot of 2025 playing early PS3 games. Not entirely sure the reason why, but I have been feeling a bit of nostalgia for Sony's gigantic blunder machine. Not because I enjoy these times, God no, are you kidding me, but because it was such an important and memorable time. Now that we are closing in on 20 years since then, I've been spinning through the early classics of the PlayStation 3. And to help off some of the workload for the end of year video, I may as well put these PS3 games in their own video. Also, let me get ahead of this. The video is called Gaming in the 2006 Year, but because there was so little 2006 for the PS3 to play with, I'm also covering some iconic 2007 games. So one of these games I played this year has to be the GOTY 2000. No, that's not happening. One of these games has to be Peak Garbage from Sony's $600 George Foreman. Let's frickin' get into it, dog. Don't worry, little Timmy, we have Halo at home. I think a game like Resistance 1 is required playing. You need to remember that all the memes about 7th gen were not trumped up falsities made off the back of a couple games. This was the brown and gray era. This was the time for shooters with awful gun feel. This was the time where a good checkpoint system could be seen neither hither nor yon. Resistance 1, it sucks so good. By and large, there isn't anything super offensive about a 7th gen shooter. Don't misconstrue that for them being enjoyable or fun, but oftentimes they are inoffensive. They lack the rough friction to make them unplayable or unbeatable. But my god, there are times where they just outright suck. The biggest issue with Resistance is that the guns feel so bad to shoot. There is nothing enjoyable from the feedback of blasting alien baddies with hot steel. In fact, when you get the shotgun, you are going to experience a level of disappointment you might not think possible when you start letting those barrels rip. It comes off as tinny and lacking a good range. You can't fire effectively from afar, and being close requires you to have sucked up so much damage just getting into that range. Really, effective range finding may be tied for the biggest issue. You engage in firefights from a distance where maybe 1 or 2 guns ever feel useful. Your standard human shoot-bang rifle is the only weapon that feels like it has an accurate enough spread and frequent enough ammo to use in most cases. The Bullseye, an ironically named firearm if I've ever heard of one, has such a massive spread that you'll need to use the secondary fire to put a homing pin on the opponent before you can unlock that gun's efficiency. All other weapons, be that the sniper, the auger, the hailstorm, what have you, all either lack useful range, feel crappy and inefficient, or are constantly wondering where their next ammo drop is. And it's a shame because these feel like the guns that justify this being a next-gen game. The hailstorm rapid fires bullets that will continuously bounce until they find something, but this never once felt useful. And the auger can shoot through walls, but the delay it incurs when hitting material makes it feel awful. Resistance feels like a game where you use the rifle because you want to, you use the bullseye because you have to, and you use the other weapons when it's your lucky day. Another problem that might be a bit more acute is that I was playing on medium difficulty and I am not sure Resistance is tailored for that. Everything hits harder than you would expect and everyone is kinda too spongy to take down without catching a bit in the teeth. This makes encounters feel awkward. You will see enemy Chimera take a knee after what your brain says is enough firepower, because it was half the fucking clip, and then get back up and keep blasting. Somewhere between the guns and the difficulty, everything lacks impact. This isn't overly difficult, and maybe even a bit more welcome of a challenge at times, but it feels artificial. And I do not like using that word, but it's the closest way to describe it. The flow of gunfights isn't right between the amount of bullets being expended and the amount of holes you need to put in the bogeys. Because enemies don't go down at a pace you expect, nor does anything really shake them, sans a point-blank double-barrel wake-up call, you get into this rut of gameplay where the path forward is trying to mitigate damage and realize that you kinda can't. There isn't much in the way of a cover system or the ability to stagger the Chimera, so firefights become an affair where the only way to engage is to take it on the chin in the process. There's points where this gets maddening to deal with, wondering how you can force an encounter or kite an enemy without taking any damage because everything hurts a little too much. Again, this feels like a problem with playing it on medium. All the stats were moved up to make it more difficult. Like, easy was the intended normal difficulty, and medium is the one that's artificially inflated. What starts out as inoffensive becomes infuriating the further you get in medium. Encounters become this awful trial and error affair. You need to know exactly who is where and when they're going to pop out because you can't afford to take an extra bullet to the chest. There are times where if you don't have a rocket, a grenade launcher, or one of the throwable explosives, the encounter borders on hopeless. You feel less like you are playing the game and more like you are attempting to cheat it. Like victory can only come at the most crafty and underhanded means. Anything less will get you punished by death and sent you back to your last, likely awful, checkpoint. And that's kinda it. You just Resistance 1 for hours until it's over. There is a rogue set piece or rare introduction of a new enemy type, but much like how the game feels stuck on your first 2 weapons, the game feels stuck on its first 2 enemies. You just keep shooting stock standard Chimera by volume. The new enemy types are rarely added to an encounter to meaningfully mix things up. If anything, it feels like little bespoke areas where you often see the composition switch up. Otherwise, it's more linear paths with the same dudes you were fighting 3 hours ago. You will see the spread shots of enemy bullseye coming at you in your sleep. It happens that frequently. But as I said, it's mostly inoffensive. There is absolutely nothing special about Resistance 1. The only aspects that you would ever feel the need to talk about are the negative ones. The story, the enemy variety, the weapon selection, boss fights or lack thereof, or the encounter design are about as milquetoast as one will find. I'm certain I am playing the least important part of this game. Like Resistance 1 must have made its bread off of couch co-op and online multiplayer. But there is something worthwhile to be found here in spite of that. I did occasionally wonder if I could use my time on something better, but Resistance 1 is a palate cleanser. Every once in a while, you gotta play something so bland and lifeless that it resets your taste buds. It was pretty breezy to scoot through the first half of the game, occasionally finding opposition in some rough encounters, but mainly just detoxing, flushing the system out, sitting on the couch for an evening and playing some old shoot bang. It's mostly fun to remember that games used to be this quality. We bought some particle board like this and just gnawed on it for a while. That good old post-Halo 7th gen mediocrity. Again, I'm sure this game is entirely built off the back of its co-op and multiplayer content. The same just cannot be true when strolling through the campaign by yourself. But when you are done with Resistance Fall of Man, you will want to take on something new and different. Something exciting. Something with a bit of flavor when you bite in. Gigantic enemy crab, real-time weapon switching, hit its weak point for massive damage. Okay, I got all the memes out of the way. Did I miss anything? Genji Days of the Blade is maybe more remembered for being a promoted PS3 launch title than a sequel to the game on the PS2. I'll be honest, outside the cover, I don't think I ever saw anything from Genji 1, and at this point I would go back out of morbid curiosity over just how better that game is to this. Genji, as I'm going to call it from now on, is a real odd one, but the end result is not exactly flattering. Credit where credit is due, there are times where this game looks great. Notably, the CGI cutscenes are stunning. Like, look at the texturing of skin that happens. And once you're in engine, the game still looks quite nice. You won't find any brown and bloom here. Genji is frequently showing off vibrant hues and some notably flashy menu UI. What's curious is that the game sometimes looks dire. Occasionally, the in-engine cutscenes look worse than the gameplay. Maybe it's the lack of movement and action going on, but I swear there are times where the texture mapping on clothing and armaments during cutscenes specifically takes a fucking nosedive. The more I looked at them, the more I realized the in-engine cutscenes perform worse. They are choppy and stuttery in ways that the normal gameplay isn't. It ends up being this game that sometimes looks awesome and sometimes looks awful. It runs fine. The frame rate likely isn't pushing 30, but outside of some uniquely hectic segments, it stays stable for the first 2/3 of the game. Really, the biggest issue with the frame rate is that the menu is a buttery smooth 60. You'll get used to the way the game looks and plays, hit start, and then go, oh shit, that's right. I would almost prefer the menu not be like this because it puts a big old neon sign over how the game is not running at the same frame rate. But enough dilly-dallying about these next-gen assets. How does the game play, Mr. Idleism J? Well, for starters, Mr. Idleism J is my father, but it's got issues. This has got to be some of the least responsive hacking and slashing I've held in my hands. Punching in a sequence of attacks feels very poorly canned and lacks any sort of enemy lock-on or much in the way of redirecting yourself once you start a chain. And really, that's if there's a chain to begin with. Don't take a 3-hit combo for granted in this game. It's so sludgy, but you can mostly work around it. Each of your 4 characters, Dual Swords Mick Protagonist, No Combo Jones, Priestess of the Almost Interesting to Play, and Speed Demon Shackled by Animation Lock, have new weapons they will get access to throughout the game. Each of these have completely unique attack sequences and do a very good job in setting themselves apart from the other weapon choices. You will likely find a weapon or two that jive with you the most, whether that means you enjoy the way they play, or they at all feel playable compared to the other offerings. The combat is iffy, but you can work with it. The bigger problems are the camera and the encounters. The camera in Genji is fixed in a strange manner and usually at a strange angle. I don't understand what's going on here, but the camera is only ever capturing the action from one angle, is usually placed closer to the ground level with the shot slightly upwards, and frequently frames the action tightly. Are they trying to do their own China Warrior where it's like, look how big and beautiful and next gen our graphics are? Or was this an attempt to cover up the inability to get a moving camera in the game? Either way, it's a pain in my ass. You see this mini map up here? This guy is your best friend because without him, it's borderline impossible to figure out what's going on. There will frequently be enemies outside of the camera's range and no amount of movement can help you see them clearly. You have to be able to fight by mini-map direction on more than a couple occasions. And that's accounting for the fact that the camera will change its fixed position depending on what part of the level you are in, disorienting your ability to tell what is due north. The camera will often be pulled right up to your ass cheeks, making you feel like you can barely even see the range of the battlefield, wishing, hoping, pleading, and praying you had something that operated like Dynasty Warrior's camera. All of this is rough, but nothing beats how quickly the game just runs the fuck out of ideas. To start, the game is very awkwardly paced. I'm not sure how to describe it, but you catch yourself viewing your surroundings going, what am I doing here again? There is this lack of emphasis on signposting your story objectives that makes the game feel like you are doing unrelated tasks. And there's not a whole lot of time spent thinking about what your task at hand actually is because you are busy doing combat rooms. Oh my god, the combat rooms do not end. After a couple hours, you get to a segment called the Ichinotani Beach. This is a combat room with 3 little areas where the combat does not fucking stop. You will be beating up on fools for what feels like a goddamn hour here because that's all the game really has for you. After you delete what feels like the population of Alabama off the sandy beach of war, you are gifted the gigantic enemy crab fight. Not exactly the reward you want, but a reward you will gladly take because it means you can finally have this behind you. But it gets even worse afterwards. Your next zone is what I have dubbed the Ice Soup No Budget Dungeon Extravaganza. Your party of 4 have been trapped in the Netherworld and split up, meaning you will now go through Valky 64 levels of hallways and combat rooms, and it takes forever. You will lose your mind in these repeated textures and room layouts. It's actively maddening, and there isn't even anything like a secondary objective to distract you. It's all combat, all the time, and you better fucking love it. If there is anything that is going to stick in my brain long after this playthrough, it's how nakedly the game needed the ice soup no budget dungeon extravaganza to pad out its runtime. Genji does not recover from this. The first third of the game is fine, honestly kinda good even, but everything from the ice soup no budget dungeon extravaganza to the credits starts tumbling downstairs. If you thought those hallways and combat rooms were tedious and tasted like cardboard, well, I hope you warm up to that flavor because the game does not have anything else in the tank. The last couple levels feature extremely protracted experiences. Both the escapades on the ship-top sea battle and the exploration inside the enemy battleship are more interesting than the ice soup no-budget dungeon extravaganza, but they are more taxing and monotonous. I was seriously getting pushed to my breaking point. I was praying to God that the game was going to end soon because it just didn't have a single thing left to offer, but the experience kept going. And honestly, the experience only got worse somehow. Not only is the enemy battleship longer in yardage traversed, but the only way they have left to gussy up encounters is to add more enemies than before. This fucking tanks the performance. You start fighting in slow motion. Battles become less of an intricate swordplay between feudal warriors and more of an underwater routine the Olympic judges would score if they didn't fall asleep. It took serious effort and having MMA fights on my laptop to power through and actually beat this game. The more I mull on Genji Days of the Blade, the more I think bringing up China Warrior was apt. This game really wants to be big. It wants to show you how large it can be, how huge these characters are, how battles can take up the whole screen. And that's not good, especially in all the instances where battles take up none of the screen because it's out of the camera's view, but it is something. Much like how China Warrior is not a good belt scroller, but it has this ostentatious scale to it. Genji is not a good game, but it is trying to impress you with its big McLarge hugeness. But even with good games, charm can only take you so far, and Genji is not a good game. I kind of want to recommend it because people should experience the ice soup no budget dungeon extravaganza, but getting past that and beating the game is way too much effort to put on a person. Genji is bad. It really seems like there could have been something going on here, but at the end it was a 12 or so hour game that felt like it should have been 5. And that's just fucking rough. Will you indulge me as I read this excerpt from Ninja Theory's Wikipedia page? Sony Computer Entertainment saved the team from bankruptcy by funding the development of Heavenly Sword, which became an expensive project. The game's poor sales resulted in Ninja Theory losing all of their in-house technologies because of contractual agreements with Sony. The team then moved on to develop Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, an underperforming project in collaboration with writer Alex Garland, and DMC Devil May Cry, whose design was highly controversial, resulting in the team receiving death threats. What a run! What an amazing cornerstone of 7th gen goodness. You go, girl, give us nothing. Heavenly Sword has you play as Naruko, who unsheathed the titular weapon, said her catchphrase of "It's swording time," and totally sworded over all those fools. You see, the Heavenly Sword has a magical power. When you use it, the frame rate gets even choppier. Yeah, this is the calling card of 7th gen games. The performance is compromised by the push for increased graphical fidelity. All credit where credit is due. The facial motion capture on Naruko is very impressive. This is the hardest shit to do, and while I maybe don't need all the obvious acting directly to the camera that happens, the game pulls it off in many cutscenes, outside of the snap-in facial emotion between cutscene and menu. Another feather in its presentation cap is the performance of Andy Serkis as main villain Lord Bohan. This may not surprise you, but the dude who did an all-star performance as Gollum in Lord of the Rings was able to nail another CG motion capture role. But all of this has a price, and it's game performance. This game runs like cock. The frame rate is so choppy that the hit stun from successfully striking enemies feels more like frame drops. It constantly feels like it is struggling to have any sort of stable frame rate during combat, and certain things, like using the ranged stance attacks, instantly make it feel worse. I know frame rate is one of those things that some people just do not have an issue with, and I apologize because I am one of those people who is more sensitive to it. But at the end of the day, it does not feel good in your hands to play an action hack and slash with a cumbersome and chugging frame rates. But if you can believe it, I am burying the lead on just how deliciously 7th gen this bad boy is. Let me guide you through the first 5 playable sections of Heavenly Sword. You start off in medio res, single-handedly fighting off a gigantic army in a showcase that is supposed to impress, but it runs like the PS3 has been left in the oven too long, before flashing back to earlier. You do a small tutorial combat room to get you in touch with the base mechanics, and then I need you to guess. What is the most 7th gen thing that could happen next? If you're younger, you might be grasping at air, but if you were around for this era, you know deep down that the answer is a turret section with 6-axis control! You get to do regular combat again as you fight the enemies that got past your mad turret skills, which will be many of them because 6-axis controls like penis and the hitboxes on enemies will make you question reality. But wait, what's that I hear in the distance? It can't be. You're telling me that the next playable section is another turret section with even more mandatory 6-axis control! Good luck hitting literally any of these targets without that 6-axis, bitch! As a contemporary product, this is obviously embarrassing, but as a historical relic I did not pay full price for. Oh my fucking god, is this funny? The humor eventually passes as you realize, well, that's all the game really has. Combat in Heavenly Sword is one of the worst I've ever seen. It's totally boneless. Narco has 3 stances: speed, ranged, and power, none of which feel particularly good thanks to the game having a crippling insecurity about not looking as cool as possible at every second. No shit, this kills the combat. You have 2 attack buttons, but they aren't like a heavy and a light. They're more like an attack 1 and attack 2, because a light attack would imply that it wouldn't be something totally wicked and flashy. Combat is a fucking crawl because every attack and combo blurs together thanks to it being a cacophony of flips and spins and sword tricks every time you press a couple buttons. It doesn't matter. The only unique attributes of combos is that some of them break guard. That's the only real utility difference. The combat feels so limp because instead of being a readable sequence of attacks, all the combos are enemies snapping bladed floor routines with little to no discernible reason to differentiate them. There is so little variance to these encounters. Every combat room is pretty much the exact same situation of needing to defeat 15 dudes before you can advance. Nothing is particularly built upon other than how each stance blocks each color of attack, and how you can counterattack if you time it right. And you learn that in the opening segments. But you will kick and scream and beg to return to this dour hacking and slashing when you realize the only other thing the game has to switch it up is more 6-axis projectile combat. If you thought Kai and her twing twang was just a momentary distraction, fucking buckle up. As the game advances, you start doing longer and longer sections as Kai, inhaling bullet time like she has a nozzle directly linked up to the fucking Matrix. It's not hyperbolic to say that Heavenly Sword has nothing going on for its gameplay. There was so much emphasis put on how cool everything looks, but nothing at all put on how cool any of it plays. It runs out of ideas pretty much from the start, and every attempt to break up the action, be that more 6-axis integration or QTE segments, will have you wishing you were chewing sand instead. For ages, I held Wet as the quintessential 7th gen slop game. Yet it's still a stone cold classic in that regard. But Heavenly Sword is the new King of the Mountain. Everyone needs to play this. If you have ever wondered why there is this pointed criticism of 7th gen in particular, this game will answer that question for you. It's pretty short, barely offers meaningful replay value, had an obvious prioritization on graphical fidelity over game performance. Dude, even in 2006, you can find posts from people who are unhappy the game is pushing graphical performance over high frame rates. Even back then, people were like, please, 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 just make the game 60 FPS. We do not care about how good it looks. Lacks any engaging gameplay, includes many embarrassing forms of gameplay, and just sometimes is embarrassing to be in the same room with. There is a juvenile tone to Heavenly Sword that does a lot more damage to the game than you might expect. I cannot put over Andy Serkis's performance enough. This dude is golden. But the work he puts in to portray Lord Bohan as a maniacal tyrant is severely undercut by how quippy, jokey the script for him is. He comes off less Manifest Destiny madness and more high on Galaxy Gas madness. It's honestly kind of deflating. Pairing that with stuff like Naruto's cinematic attacks being 50% made up of strikes to someone's balls, and it feels like they tried to make a serious, dramatic game but couldn't help themselves put in some type of cringy of its era humor. They really thought they were cooking something with this game. I wanted to call it modern Kusoge, and I hold to that. It's not unplayable or unbeatable, but it is absolutely poop from a butt the way that Kusoge may imply. It sucks all of the ass, and you should play it. Absolutely rancid game. Comes with my highest recommendation. The big question that was in my mind during much of Heavenly Sword was, hey, God of War 1 on PS2 is good, right? Lair is... oh god, how do I say this? Lair is a very sad game. This is one of the big early PS3 releases that was remembered and remembered for negative reasons. A dragon-riding fantasy aerial combat game that I guess was trying to show off the power of the PS3 and completely died under that weight. It would be unprofessional to bury the lead. Lair runs like ass. It is one of the worst performing games you will ever experience. The frame rate chugs to unholy lows. The texture and asset pop-in will fill you with awe, and the animations of certain elements will be purposely truncated in ways that almost feels unsettling. There is not a visual aspect to Lair outside of its CGI cutscenes that isn't compromised. And maybe more notoriously, Lair controls primarily through the 6-axis. You steer your dragon with more motion control and waggling than the Wii could ever possibly muster. There are QTEs where you need to shake the 6-axis with such ferocity that I thought I might knock something loose. It's bewildering, and it gives Lair a time and place within the early steps of 7th gen that is stronger than almost any other game. This was an iconic flounder for the PS3. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I think I like this game. Despite how much this game borders on unplayable, and if you have motion sickness, then pack it up, because this shit is actually unplayable. I think the underlying base of what's going on could have led to a very good game. I will not defend the 6-axis controls, but I must say I didn't have much difficulty in controlling my dragon. I dare say the 6-axis was responsive. I didn't encounter bouts of my flight path being so rogue from what I was intending to do that it tanked my ability to play the game. It kind of works, and in a game with an actual frame rate, there's a possibility that this would have worked well. It's also possible that Lair knew it was going to be a nightmare to wrangle, so it helps that so much of the game has a level of lock-on to it. By default, there is a soft lock-on to your shots, so you routinely hit what you're aiming at. And when it comes to dogfights with other air forces or targeting specific objectives, the game has a dedicated lock-on that will mostly get the job done. It will also make you fucking vomit with how it snaps the camera, but I guess that's the price to pay. Between both lock-ons, the QTEs, the little dragon fighting minigame, and the ability to land and crush foot soldiers, Lair has a bevy of systems to it. It was designed with some level of effort and creativity, which extends to the level designs. By virtue of being a mission-based series of levels, Lair is constantly throwing new looks at the player. Bespoke encounters crop up occasionally, and recycled ideas are combined to create new objectives. Unlike so much of what we are looking at today, Lair never feels like sawdust and cardboard. It has ideas, it has pacing, it asks you to do things, and when that thing is done, it does not ask you to do that thing 4 more times to pad out the game. Strangely, Lair feels at odds with so many of these other early PS3 releases because of that. It's entirely possible that the reason I was having fun was because encounters and objectives were tightly designed. Sure, I was playing one of the fucking worst performing games my poor, unfortunate eyes had ever seen, but I wasn't being told to repeat the motions until I disassociate. That's why I think Lair is sad. I think there might have been a really good game hiding within all this mess. The story is inoffensive and a little more interesting than you would expect. The gameplay is significantly hampered by the PS3 being on fire, but you can see the sparks of joy in the flames. There is a soul here. There is a good game crying and screaming to be let out that will never see the light of day. This feels like a PS3 game that should have been a PS4 game. Honestly, I wish we could have seen a Lair 2 for PS4. When you do the bombing run on the Mokai Citadel, you can squint just enough to see how cool this could have been. It feels like there is possibility here. These large maps with so many active assets could have been impressive instead of aggravating. There's a very good write-up on Polygon that details the history of Lair, how everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong during its development. It just emphasizes that sadness, that feeling of what Lair could have been. I think it's easy and honestly proper to dunk on this game above a lot of other early PS3 offerings. But unlike so much of the rest of the slop, there was something here. It just never could be. Even with all of the completely inexcusable faults with it, I had more fun with Lair than most of the other games in this video. You can tell that the developers knew how to make a game like this. Shit, their past works back that up. But the execution was completely pear-shaped. The litany of problems it has aside, Lair's not chomping on cardboard for hours on end, and somehow that gets it above the bar when looking at the rest of these offerings. I can't recommend it, but I will say it's somehow better than the other games of its time. We need to take a second to explain why this is showing up here. Unlike everything else we're covering today, Enchanted Arms is not a PS3 exclusive. In fact, up until a couple years ago, I thought this was only on Xbox 360. It released a bit after launch for the 360, and then it took a little less than a year to show up for PlayStation 3. Much like how Sony's system itself had to tail Microsoft. Partially, we are showcasing it because I've always wanted to play this since forever. But really, I think it's important to cover it because it's kind of what the PS3 was in need of. I don't want to sound like a fucking homer, but JRPGs were prime real estate for Sony. After Final Fantasy VII reshaped culture and sold a floppity jillion PS1s, there was a significant want for more of that genre, and not just in Japan. Would it surprise you that Final Fantasy X, X2, 12, Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2, and Dragon Quest VIII are all extremely high-selling games worldwide? Shit, in Japan, they are the highest-selling PS2 games. I'm not going to tell you that FFVIII was the killer app that moved systems, but it was on the single greatest holiday lineup image in history. Make sure to check in with your local 30 or 40-year-old. They just felt happiness for the first time in ages looking upon this image again. One of the biggest issues, as you've seen thus far, is that the early PS3 lacked any recognizable Sony properties. Unlike the PS2 and kind of the PS1 and actually the SNES now that I think about it, that early platform appetite for a JRPG was not going to be fulfilled by a Final Fantasy game. FF13 was currently in the development nightmare zone. It would take years for it to release. And Dragon Quest, well, honestly, the fact that no mainline Dragon Quest game appeared on the console could explain a lot about this gen by itself. So if you were an early adopter of the PS3 and you had an itch for the JRPG, Enchanted Arms was the best thing you were getting. Actually, not even the best thing. It was the only thing you were getting. It would take another year for Eternal Sonata to show up, and that, like Enchanted Arms, is one of many examples where the PS3 is getting the Xbox 360's hand-me-downs.
Post-production Jay here. I do want to throw in that the PS3 would see Valkyria Chronicles and Disgaea 3 in 2008. Those help out a little bit, but I don't bring it up in the body of the video because it doesn't inherently imply that like people who want to turn-based JRPG are going to cross-pollinate with the demand for a strategy or tactics RPG, but the other side of that is, hey bud, that's all you were fucking getting for a while. Like, those are your options. I hope you like something out of there.
Final Fantasy XIII wasn't going to happen worldwide until 2010. There was no help here. So you got Enchanted Arms, and this game is interesting. First off, it's always fun to look at a game by FromSoft that is off-type for them. Something outside their home cooking of first-person exploratory games, mecha battle games, or Soulsborne games. From has never really done a straight-up JRPG before, so it's cute that the generation notorious for running JRPGs off consoles was kickstarted by fucking From, of all people, doing one. Okay, enough preamble. This game sucks. It's not completely without merit, but it's not a good time. The best thing it has going for it is its personality. The starting cast of feeder tube idiot protagonist, Mr. Smart, Sexy, and Literally Perfect, and Biting Queen who fucking wishes he was anywhere else, have amazing chemistry. Although, we do have to talk about Makoto because it's very obvious that he's gay, but too often it feels like he's being played as a joke. The English voice acting feels a little too straight man being asked to play a homosexual, and that's the punching down humor. It sucks because I love that Makoto is a dramatic bitch, but it just comes off way too much like he's a mildly homophobic caricature. Awful representation aside, you will spend hours watching these three chat, and they gel together perfectly. There is a staggering amount of chatting in this game, with maybe half-ish of it being voiced. While this does turn the pacing into a foot race of glaciers, I think all the conversations are the most charming part of Enchanted Arms. The voice acting itself is kind of hit or miss. Atsuma's VA in particular was given some notably poor direction, and likely a script with a couple names misspelled. But walking around the world and shooting the shit with these little VN adjacent sections is where the game has the most amount of heart and charm. Because if I'm being honest, the combat feels entirely tacked on. Enchanted Arms is a traditional turn-based JRPG with a pinch of tactics flair to it. Your party of 4 has to navigate their half of the grid and bop enemies sequestered to the other half. There are no basic attacks. Everything is a resource-expending skill that has a unique offensive attack pattern to it, or some form of defensive support spell, also with a pattern of effect associated with it. This is fine, but one concession kinda kills the battles. Your HP and EP, the resources for skills, fully replenish after each battle. This makes a lot of encounters devolve into just DPSing the battle away. There's no reason to think about healing because time spent healing is time wasted and not finishing the battle, wherein you'll heal back up anyways. The majority of thinking is reserved for boss battles, where you actually might use your full suite of skills to tackle a challenge. All of the random battles feel like time wasters, where the only challenge is the fact that your party placement is randomized on the grid. But there is a secondary health, so to speak. Your VP is a number that goes down after every battle. You are incentivized to turn 1 your encounters as often as possible because the longer a battle takes, the more VP everyone will lose afterwards. Since most battles can be turn 1 if lucky, this doesn't loom too largely. But if your battles are unlucky, or heaven help you, you run from battles, your VP across the party will start to lower. When a character's VP hits rock bottom, they effectively become useless. They start battles with only 1 HP and 1 EP, dooming them to being able to do basically nothing. You need to switch them out to someone else or one of your many bootleg Pokémons. Outside of some consumables, the only way to refill VP is at a little refill station that is placed similarly to how any checkpoint would be in a normal JRPG. This fucking sucks so badly. It reeks of designing answers to problems you created. It's like a knock-on effect where the decision to replenish health after every battle creates a necessity of VP being the real tax that battles bring. Being in a dungeon and getting turned around or exploring too many times or just getting unlucky because the encounter rate is extremely swingy and losing all of your character's VP sucks the fucking stars from the sky. Likely because of that, so much of Enchanted Arms is a hallway simulator, going down extremely linear paths with few diverticula or distractionary points of interest. And I guess that's good, because the way VP is designed means you are putting yourself in trouble if you have an actual dungeon that requires back and forth traversal. Fuck! It's one of many problems that compounds the longer you play the game. The item economy is almost non-existent. The only thing enemies drop are these 3 crafting gems. All consumables or items otherwise need to be bought, and you can only ever hold 9 of them. Not that there are that many to begin with. You only purchase things at little store crystals, a pit stop that does all your purchasing, weapon making, or golem synthesizing. Speaking of, golems feel even more tacked on. Large parts of this game will not give you a full party, meaning you need to round out your team with this ungracefully eclectic mix of enemies you can craft up. But the second you have 4 main characters, this entire system becomes ignorable, outside of small instances or backup characters if you run out of VP. And then all your gems become borderline useless because crafting golems is the primary use for them. Enchanted Arms is like an informative game of what not to do. So many of these mechanics feel entirely boneless and unengaging to play with. The game isn't bad in the Kusoge sense, but bad in the way that it can only ever soar to the mark of competence. Battling isn't fun, exploring isn't fun, item management isn't fun, your golem subsystem isn't fun, 6-axis support isn't fun, leveling isn't fun, the story isn't fun, nothing is fun. Despite not being an actually broken or wretched game, Enchanted Arms quickly breaks you down over time. Everything is a slog to perform. Just walking from place to place feels arduous as you wonder what the game could possibly do to snap you awake. It makes confusing pacing choices, having conversations go on simply too long or tearing away control from the player to tutorialize how to do something simple like climb a ladder or operate a minecart. It did the minecart one nearly 10 hours into the game. I think I fucking understand how to walk up to something and press X when given a prompt, especially when it's the only object in the area that stands out. Like how an animated part of an old Scooby-Doo cartoon is obvious by the fact that they aren't part of the background. And every time a new scenario pops up, you can just feel the molasses enter your veins. Like, oh my god, who fucking cares about this subplot? Can we just get on with it? Also, while being negative, this game looks like shit. I don't know if this is because my PS3 is outputting at 1080 and Enchanted Arms, really, most PS3 games, were not able to actually hit that 1080 Sony so badly wanted you to believe is real. But everything in Enchanted Arms looks like it was reconstructed from shattered glass. Sharp edges and jaggies are as far as the eye can see. Sometimes the entire room looks so fuzzy you would think you are playing the sequel to Final Fantasy VIII. It's possible that this is an issue that stems from being a 360 port, because sometimes this shit is embarrassing. Like, some textures are so fucking blown out that it has to be a porting problem. I can't imagine it was originally this bad. But similar to Genji, there is this emphasis on scale that comes across. In Genji, it wanted you to be impressed with how big the characters were. In Enchanted Arms, I think it wants you to be impressed with how big the locations are. They're not always big in walkable distance, but they exist at such a scale that makes you feel small and them feel gargantuan. It's one of the few times something effective happens in this game. The way the camera is so zoomed out to make you feel like an ant in some of these locations. The eeriness of moving, but almost feeling like you're going nowhere. I want to be done railing on this game, but I have one last critical issue I want to address. When Enchanted Arms starts, it starts beautifully. And something that helps that are the first 2 songs the game plays. Oh my fucking god. This dreamy sample-based track whisks you away to something more magical than expected. The soft warmth, the cheery, energetic beat, the optimistic backing samples, all of it comes off like a forgotten track from the Avalanche's first album. It's utterly sensational. It takes you out of the magical academy you start in and transforms it into this idyllic paradise. And then you step outside. The outdoor festival is made even more celebratory by this soaring collection of samples melting together to create a beautifully messy confluence of excitement and cheer. In absence of a larger festival space or a greater crowd of NPCs, this song makes the Foundation Festival feel bubbly and alive. These back-to-back hits prime you for an auditory experience that will never come. The rest of this game has nothing like this. Nothing even close. The rest of the soundtrack is as soulless and empty and unimpressive as the game itself. Nothing ever rises to these moments. Nothing ever crafts an evocative scene with its inclusion. There are songs that are fine sounding, but no other tracks have this sort of plunder phonics layering and depth to it. You are trudging through this muddy husk of a game, wondering, praying that something like that opening hour will come back to surprise you. And it's never showing up to save the experience. Enchanted Arms might be the worst JRPG I've played. Again, it's not actually bad. If it was bad, there might be some honest charm to it. It's soulless. It's boring. Playing it to completion felt like I was draining my life force during every session. 7th Gen was a time where console JRPGs went to die. They fled to the handhelds because those systems offered a better scale and scope for what they were trying to do. Enchanted Arms is the harbinger of those times, kicking off the console by showing you a particularly awful time for traditional turn-based enthusiasts. I like being able to play games to completion. Very rarely do I actively drop a game for reasons other than forgetfulness or juggling too many at once. But Enchanted Arms tested me. If I wasn't playing it for the show, I very well may have tapped out. What a truly joyless experience it was after that first hour. But before I end, I do want to give it one nicety. This was somebody's something. Because the game isn't actually broken, because you can actually beat it without a guide or looking up help, you can all too easily see that this was something that left a mark on someone when they were 15. When I was in the final moments of this game, I could at least feel the warmth of an experience that would have resonated with a person when they were at their most impressionable. It would not shock me that someone has nostalgia for this. Sure, it sucks wildly, but I wouldn't doubt there are people who feel a way about this game, and I wouldn't take that from them. The game is bad, but it's never so bad you should quit. But it's not good either. It's never good enough to rise above to anything special. It's the ultimate 4 out of 10 video game. I'm glad I played it, because it was a game I was looking forward to as the new gen started to happen. But I'll never need to play it again, nor would I ever recommend anyone else play it. As a friend put it, it was my mid that got away. But I'm at least glad I went back to find it. Oh my god. I had no idea. I didn't even think this was possible. After all these early PS3 games just stinking up the joint, being a mess of poor design choices and even poorer performance, Ridge Racer 7 is like taking a drink of the freshest water on Earth. This shit cured my depression. It parted the clouds to let the sun shine once again. Ridge Racer 7 is fucking amazing, and it's incredible that this was a launch game. It probably helps that this was kind of just Ridge Racer 6 Plus, being an improved port of what was on the 360. But oh my god, this is the kind of shit that would make you believe in the next generation of video gaming. The most important thing about Ridge Racer 7 is that it is a nearly flawless 1080-60. Oh my fucking god. This game both looks and performs like a dream. Outside of packed corners where multiple people are boosting, this game never drops a frame. It is buttery smooth around every hill, valley, and hairpin. So few games on the PS3 could do this. It's like Ridge Racer 7 and Wipeout HD, both of which are games so good looking that you would believe video gaming could never improve past it. I can't stop gushing about this. RR7 looks immaculate. The draw distance on these dense and detailed maps is perfect. There are shader reflections off the geometry, motion blurring off the taillights of your opponents. I put this at the end of the video because it's important to score that the PS3 could actually do this. The system, somewhere deep in that cell processor, had the power to create games this crisp and stunning, this fluid and visceral. Games that if put on an advertising monitor would convince you that this was the future. And god damn it, dude, it may as well be. Outside of some texture quality on the decals, which are fuzzy and compressed, everything in this game is standing on mountains compared to contemporaneous releases. It's one of the most impressive things I've ever seen, that the PlayStation Triple could actually pull off the promised performance that so many games would be miles from hitting. And thank God the game is immaculate too. Holy shit, dude, what a racer. This game has the juice. I feel the draw of a car pervert oozing from every choice. Each vehicle and manufacturer feels like they have a unique performance to the car. You can tell some drift tighter or looser than others. It's always good to have your favorite. I was Aj Prophecy for life. But some trials force you into a certain manufacturer and it becomes your responsibility to understand that car. Feel the way it wants to be driven. Operate it within the context of how it works instead of how you want it to work. It's so humbling to be put behind the wheel of something that you don't often use and then feel like it's your first day of driver's ed because you look like a fucking clown out there. And the visual designs. Like, oh my fucking god, dude. We all know R4 has the best graphic design in the game. That's just a given. But RR7 is still doing it big. The different speedometers for different manufacturers, the deluge of Namco properties that make up parts and graphics, the sleek and futuristic post-Y2K minimalism that permeates the entire game. This is it. This is the fucking sauce. Reiko Nagase, please, I am on my hands and knees. 1 DM, that is all I ask. And man, this game is hard. It demands your skill. To succeed in RR7 means you need to become one with the car and track. You need to edge out the competition by inches. Drifts need to be perfect. Boosts need to be flawless. Fight for the inside. Box out those behind you. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I sat up off the couch and pumped my fist in the air after scoring first. This game has the emotion required to make you care and the difficulty that demands you get fucking nice at controlling the beasts of steel. In a vacuum, Ridge Racer 7 is amazing. It's one of the best racing games I've ever played. But in its context, this is incomprehensible. The one game that was able to draw every drop of juice from the PS3 in a game that would sadly be the last of its kind. This was one of the few games for the early PS3 that had the name brand appeal, and Sony could never make it happen again. The PS4 didn't have Ridge Racer 8, nor did the PS5. I think I could sit here and gush about Ridge Racer 7 for hours, but that is taking up more time that could be spent playing it. It's almost sad, seeing both the game that fulfilled the next-gen dream and seeing it be the last of its line. I can't believe we haven't seen Reiko in a mainline Ridge Racer in almost 20 years. I think more than most consoles, it's important to remember what the early PS3 really looked like. This was Sony's gigantic fall from grace. It was what let Xbox pull away and establish themselves so deeply that it would take multiple generations of wet fart boxes to kill them. It was the time Nintendo stopped trying to play ball and decided to be a star in a new sport instead. The early years of the PS3 were wild. PS3 has no games is one of the most enduring memes in gaming culture. It's the next evolution of Sega does what Nintendo don't. The amount of effort and creativity that went into decrying the lack of noteworthy games on the PlayStation 3 has maybe never been topped. The rancid underbellies of gaming online fandom stood shoulder to shoulder with their fellow man as they all took turns letting you know PS3 has no games. And yeah, the selection served up today was pretty fucking stinky. This isn't a reappraisal piece. Sure, not all these games are like dire abominations or anything, but this shit definitively was not it. People wanted the games that sold the older PlayStations. They wanted the Gran Turismos, the Final Fantasies, the Dragon Quests, the Metal Gear Solids, the God of Wars, and all that shit was years away, if coming at all. Sony's overpriced burger grill was able to tank 2 previous console generations of PlayStation being on top of the world. But only temporarily. This isn't a tease for some sort of gaming of the 2011 year, but Sony eventually turned it around in a big way. Early PS3 is iconic for how bad it was, but by the end of that infamous 7th gen, PlayStation 3 was doing more than fine. It was doing great. It had turned the ship around, and the bangers they had been cooking in the oven were finally ready for prime time. And while all the games from the last half of the PS Triple were where the bread was really buttered, early PS3 is vastly more interesting. It's fascinating to see what Sony was trying to hang their hat on in the first half of the console's life. With basically none of their name brands available, they had to take new ideas and try to make statues out of them. The first year or so of most consoles are the interesting ones. I love looking at rough and tumble 3D and the start of Saturn or PS1, or how different companies handle different ways of utilizing the PS2's power. For the PS3, I think it's interesting looking at how poorly it proved itself. Like, I zeroed in on the ways that Genji and Lair tried to make themselves feel next gen. But if you take Resistance and really squint, that could have been a PS2 game in some ways. A lot of playing that was me thinking, this does not feel monumentally better or more technologically advanced from Halo on the Xbox OG. And that's because outside of those really interesting guns, it just isn't. Early PS3 is fascinating because it's not like they didn't have anything to give you. The PS3 did not literally have no games the way any Xbox after 360 did. But when all your tentpole names are MIA, goddamn did it feel like that. Like, you have to remember that the release of the PS3 was kind of based on lies. One of the most iconic aspects of how the PlayStation Triple was promoted was the bullshot. Teasers and trailers for games that were meant to mislead the consumers on the power of the machine and its games. Killzone 2, Final Fantasy XIII, MotorStorm, all of these trailers were fucking horse shit. And in some cases, they would have promotional screenshots that were, at their most charitable, not indicative of a final product. There's a great Digital Foundry video covering the E3 2005 PS3 reveal and giving commentary on what was and what was not totally faked. Maybe in another decade I'll have the same strange nostalgia for the PlayStation 4, but I kinda doubt it. 7th gen was the last truly interesting time in gaming, and that's because so much of it did suck. It sucked in ways that were unique and memorable, and since then things have been a bit more cut and dry. I still love the PS4 and the Switch, and maybe one day the PS5 will release a game that I feel makes it worth purchasing that honking system for. And the game is probably just fucking called a price cut, but I guess that would require a better timeline. But they just don't have that foundational stank on them the way the PS360 era does. This is the perfect generation to look back on. Living through it was not great, but as a museum of what happened, my lord, is it interesting. It's fun and nostalgic to pick through these days, to remember how they tied to my high school and college life, but also to remember that the jokes about 7th gen did not spring up out of the ether. I'll be honest, there's a part of me that wonders if my love for the PS3 is held up entirely because it was a second golden age for fighting games. A genre that literally does not work if they cannot lock 60. So I was enjoying one genre living its best life while most everyone else was trying to keep their head above water. This was a very compromised time for gaming, and in some ways, the end of the good days before it. But it was also the necessary baby steps into the HD 16:9 era of gaming we live in now. Blemishes and all, I still love you. He's gonna take you back to the past, 2006, to play the shitty games that suck ass 7th gen!